good, Ryan? Good evening again. I'd like to call the committee of the whole for the Village of Cary for November 7th, 2023 to order with roll call, please.
Dudek?
Here.
Weinhammer?
Here.
McAlpine?
Here.
Collier?
Here.
Stefani?
Here.
Thank you. Would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Moving to the public comments, the public is invited to make an issue-oriented comment on any matter of public concern not otherwise on the agenda. Pardon me? There are none. So we'll go ahead and close public comments at 6:19. We have two items on our discussion. The first is our annual real estate tax levy for the tax year 2023. I guess Kelly's going to hit it off from here, huh?
Yes, good evening. So in front of you on the screen here, we sent out, some agenda items and some narrative before the meeting. On the screen here is kind of our options for CPI, or CPI new growth for 2023 for the property taxes. So this lays out the four options that the board has to discuss. Finance's recommendation is going to be option number 4. That's the CPI, which is 5%. That's the limit. I think CPI was like 6 point something. I don't have the exact number. So 5% is our limit. So the 5% and the new growth, which was 0.78% this year, which would be a 5.78% increase in taxes, or the $157,967 number that you guys see there on that screen. Other options obviously would be no tax levy, which I not recommend, new growth only, or the CPI. On the next screen there, this is just kind of a reminder of our distribution of property tax dollars. The Village of Cary currently has is a 4.86%. And the remainder of the distribution between the Fire Protection District, the county, library, park services, schools. The board would have seen this then when we did our budget workshop, but this is our budgeted revenues by category that we are currently in for fiscal year 24. 29% of our revenues do come from net property taxes. This, Courtney was very nice and helped put together, but this is currently some of our bigger items in our fiscal year 24 budget in the general fund, and what we are estimating for fiscal year 25. Some of those numbers, from last year, we're a little lower in our estimates with the FOP contract not being in place yet. So we have our wage increase of approximately $174,000. Our insurance increases, professional services, that includes IRMA, CCOM, attorney, our LNA accounting.
IT,
thank you. And then our police pension contribution increase, which at the last meeting, Heidi was here to go through that actuarial discussion for the police pension contribution. And then new for fiscal year 25 are the required police body worn and in-car camera systems. So you'll see we're estimating just in these categories approximately $425,000 increase from where we are right now in fiscal year 24, which is then also kind of why we're recommending that, higher number, the CPI and the new growth. I'm going to open up for questions, discussion.
This is always a fun topic to talk about. But when we look at these things, we can't look at it in a vacuum. We have to look at what our costs are, where they're going, what the economy is doing. So before we make any decisions, or I'd love to hear some of the comments from the board.
Could you flip back one slide, please?
which slide do you
Which
want?
slide?
The one, I think it's the one after this one. It had the increases, the 400 and something thousand. Yeah.
Yep,
There you
this
go.
one?
Yep, thank you. So on this one, the 47,000, that's a mandate, right?
Correct.
So that
Yes.
we have no way around that.
And to be, that's an estimate of, so often the body worn cameras are a 5-year contract, so that's just the 1 year amount, but that would be over a 5-year period.
Okay. So since we levy per year, I'll just leave my comments to 1 year, but that's a good point, thank you. So, police contribution, pension contribution, 91,000. The two of those together are just below what your recommendation is, option number 4, if I understood you correctly.
Correct.
So, I mean, I get it, nobody ever, and you're right, this is always the most fun conversation we have. But of the 157,000 that would be raised under option 4, it really pretty much just offsets something that we've been trying to make a bigger contribution towards, the pension fund, and really an unfunded mandate. So, I think, given that, I would be supportive of 4, option 4.
I can piggyback. I'll piggyback on that. And I agree. I think it's prudent. We have to, we've talked before that if you don't take some of these things, it's take it or lose it. You can't make it up. I think that every single person knows what the cost of things has gone up, and that also affects us as a village. And in order for us to stay sustainable and to stay solid and not get ourselves into a financial pickle, I think that, it's really prudent on us to be good stewards of that. We're very good stewards with the tax dollars. We do a lot with what we've got, but we also have to look at these things that we need to fund. The last thing we want to be in is a situation where we're getting further and further behind on any type of a pension. Everyone's tasked with some of these things, but this doesn't get into some of the other things. It doesn't even touch the wages. That's a mandate too when you look at it. We have an FOP contract. We have to do this. So if we don't do these things, then where else are we going to come? Are we going to come and try and add extra taxes? What are we going to do? We know that we might have some additional sources of tax revenue coming in, but until we see what that is, I think that we have to take what the reality of the situation is and say, how are we going to be good financial stewards? So I am in support of that as well.
Trustee Stefani?
I'll go.
You go.
We go through this every year. Can you put it in a real dollar amount on average, what it would cost the homeowner?
I don't have those exactly in front of me. I know when Wes was here last year, he had put together, so I can definitely get that number for you. I know that last year, I think the increase was approximately $18 per homeowner. And this year, I actually think it's a little bit less of an increase. I know we're increasing the dollars more, but the EAV did rise. So I think that it was even less than that, the difference between last year and this year.
Appreciate that, thank you. I'm in support of 4 also.
You okay with number 4 as well, too? I think,
Can you please go back to the previous slide with the options? Thank you. I know you skipped over me.
I didn't skip over you. I was going,
It's okay. So I'm with option 2 with the new growth only. I understand, what Trustee Dudek is saying too, with regard to the mandates that we are required to do through the state of Illinois. Can you just explain to me again, the CPI 5%, is that just on the taxes then? Or with Dale asking the question, it's another $17, $18
I believe,
for a homeowner?
I'll let Kelly answer that, but it's very similar to what we did last year. It'll have pretty much the same impact, if
Correct.
not a little bit less.
So the new growth doesn't really impact the dollars. The CPI does. As I said, I don't have the exact number in front of me, and I can certainly get it to you. It is going to be less than that $18 increase that it was last year for the homeowners, because the EAV did change. And I actually think last year, once that final EAV came out, it was even less than the $18 per homeowner. So correct, that CPI is what we're limited to as a non-home rule community of the 5%, and that'll be what affects the property tax bills. The new growth is so limited that it doesn't affect.
Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
You know, I agree with what, you know, we're very fiscally responsible here in the Village of Cary. Since I've sat in this chair since 2013, I think we've only raised the CPI twice, and it's been the last 2 years. Only a couple of those years was just the new growth.
Yeah, we actually have a slide
Okay.
on that also. Sorry, we didn't put that up before. So, right, there was a few years, I think this is the last 8 years, where there was no increase, and then either we just did new growth. The last 2 years, we've done new growth on CPI.
So we're facing challenging times. Everything, the cost of doing business is astronomical. Through my other role, through the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, we are inundated with these unfunded mandates that the state is continuously throwing at us. Not to even, you know, mentioning the police cam, that's nothing compared to what's coming down. You know, with their, you know, they're always telling us that we got to keep our eye on our property taxes, but they keep taking money away. You know, our LGDF, we worked very hard to work with that. They take that away from us. Some of our fees, they're taking that away from us. You know, we're looking at things of how are we going to continue to provide the services that our residents demand and expect in a community like ours. We have to make them responsible decisions. Sometimes it's not popular. I agree with the general consensus of the board to take option number 4. And I don't take these decisions lightly. This is something that we have to look moving forward. This is probably the second time that we've been able to capture the 5%. In years past, it hasn't been 5%. And when you look at that number, 157,967, that's compounded every year going forth. So it's not like it's just a one-time hit. It's something that we could build into our budgets. And we look at things that can help offset property taxes, that can people pay as you go. It's a little bit more tolerable. People can swallow that a little bit better. And that's what Kelly's going to talk to us next about. So I think this is a perfect segue. I think you've got your marching orders on the direction that the board wants to go on this. So I'll let you continue down your path.
So can we at least have this item up for separate action, like voting for the village board?
Always.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Because of how high because of the percentage, it would have a
Correct.
public hearing as well.
Yes, because we have to do truth in taxation because it's over that 5%, so it will be separate. But both of those, the approval of the tax extension and the truth in taxation will be on the December 5th board meeting.
And so you wanted the new growth separate than the CPI. Okay, just making sure. Okay, any other comments on that? Let's talk about home rule.
I'm going to turn it over to Courtney,
Oh,
actually.
Courtney's going to do it?
Just, we'll think of this as a little education on what home rule is and the potential advantages it has. This discussion is based on some of the feedback we received, I believe, back in September when we were first talking about potential revenue sources that we may have. So home rule ultimately is an opportunity for municipalities to have more local control in areas of finance, zoning, building, safety, matters of public health, and morals. Municipalities that have a population above 25,000 are automatically granted home rule status, while smaller communities such as Cary can put that question on a ballot and then let voters decide. There's 221 home rule communities in Illinois. Just looking at population quickly, roughly 133 communities are smaller than 25,000 who are currently home rule. So some of the potential advantages, one of the big ones we've somewhat already been discussing is related to those state mandates. Home rule has the ability to opt out of certain mandates as they're created unless preempted by the state. So unless the state specifically calls out that home rule has to follow it, you have that opportunity, a little more flexibility. Local elected officials have that flexibility to determine, based on the village's needs, what decisions they need to make that are best for the community. Finance-wise, there's a few things. One of the big ones is the ability to reduce that property tax burden by putting in place other types of taxes. So examples here would be the home rule sales tax, a gas tax, an amusement tax if that ever was something that we could explore. Other potential revenue sources include increasing our gaming terminal license fees or enacting a real estate transfer tax. Home rule communities are also not subject to PTEL, allowing that flexibility with raising or lowering property taxes. You can incur debt beyond 20 years, and there are fewer restrictions on creating multi-year contracts. These are just some other advantages as well. You can enact a vacant home ordinance to hold lenders accountable for foreclosed properties, adopt and enforce a crime-free rental housing ordinance that allows for more control to address safety, property, or nuisance issues. It expands the zoning authority. So this would be to modify and streamline zoning and planning processes, specifically for variations or business regulations. And then there's more flexibility with the police, the organization of the police department. So this would be, for example, creating the position of commander. The chief could provide more examples if need be on that one. And then this is just the process, how a referendum would work. We talked about this a little bit last time. It's very similar. So the village board would be able to pass an ordinance to put it on the ballot. And I've put here in red the deadline just based on the upcoming March election. So let's say we were moving forward with this. By January 2nd, we would have to pass an ordinance for referendum. Then we have to get that certified with the clerk by January 11th. That's the county clerk. And then we would be able to provide public outreach about home rule, what it means, what are the advantages, and then they would vote March 19th. If it were to pass, that immediately enacts home rule status. So that's kind of how the home rule process would work. Are there any questions about home rule or any of those examples?
You've made an example out of how many communities are smaller than us that have home rule right now?
133 or below 25,000.
Were they all brought to referendum and passed?
Yes.
That's
They
the
have
only
to.
way you can do it is referendum.
Yes. So even communities that are, let's say Freeport was a very good example. They were over 25,000 for a number of years. As soon as they dropped, they had to go to referendum.
Okay.
Just quickly on that, so if you have home rule status and then a new census comes out and you fall behind, they take it away from you right away?
Correct.
Okay.
But once if a referendum passed, we would never lose it?
No, and if we, well, yeah,
I would
never,
say yes.
if it does, yeah.
Okay.
But if we just do it by census alone, like, for instance, Woodstock just did this, I think, 3 or 4 years ago. They ended up paying for a special census
To get their count
to get their count up to where it is.
Right. We're not
So
going to
they-
come close.
We're not going to come close, no. But our thing is how we talk about it with the regional support that we have, and there's a lot of other municipalities are looking at doing this right now as well. Just the benefit it is, and the less burden that it would be reliant on property taxes. You know, people hate writing that check twice a year. It's a big check that a lot of people have to write. It's big on their budget. But when you look at things as you pay as you go, it's a little bit more tolerable. And it's not just on our residents or our businesses. It's on everybody that comes to our community. We'll be helping, throw more money into that pot. So we'll be less reliant on the CPI in years past if we can get something through that. But what we've talked about, too, is like every time we do a survey in the village of Cary, the number one concern that our residents have is our roads. We could dictate that this 1% that we would get has to go towards roads. And that would be something I think that the community would get behind. But we have to get out in front and control the message and tell people what it is and what it's not. There's a lot of miscommunication out there when it comes to what the capabilities are for home rule versus non-home rule. So we would have our work to do to make sure that people are getting the right information.
So talking about, you said we could, basically, yes, when we're talking about and educating, we could say that 1% was going to go for the roads. Do you write that into the referendum, that it always has to stay that way? I mean, I don't want to box us into something either. I'm just kind of curious if you put it in there.
So if you're just talking about the home rule
Yes,
referendum, that would just be
Right.
enacting home rule status.
okay.
And then once you were home ruled, then you
You
could
can
look
enact.
towards enacting the home rule sales tax. So
Okay.
the referendum would just be for the home rule status, and the tax part could potentially, if the board wanted to, come later.
Right, that's typically what happens. But there's another thing that we'll talk about is the non-home rule sales tax, which also needs a referendum.
To the point of the road expenditures, can you, if you want, that's a major expenditure, obviously, so it's a big impact. If we had other items like that, that from time to time would require a lot of money, can we change the application of the 1%, or once you say it's roads, it's always roads?
I don't think so.
Depends how you phrase the question. So it can be phrased, still, this is going to sunset. I don't remember the date now, but it is going to sunset several years from now. You can phrase the question for general operations and capital expenditures like roadways, or tax relief, which really wouldn't be necessarily what you'd be looking at the same time. But at this point, passing that referendum question can include the authority to spend it from the general fund, general operational fund.
Yeah, thanks for that. I appreciate that. To me, I don't think anybody up here thinks this would be a slam dunk to do because of the perception, like so many other things, as you mentioned, Mayor. I think if we decide that we want to move to put it on a referendum, we have to do a very good job of explaining what we can and can't do about that. Because to me, I think just the example of the roads would be something an awful lot of people could get behind. But what is typical is they just think it's another tax, period, end of sentence. And obviously, that's not the reason we're looking to do it. So I just think that whatever decision is, if it's to move forward, the marketing piece, the explanation, how we go about doing that's really, really important.
Well, too, one of the things that I think about too, and I think there was a study that Courtney had done before about the surrounding communities and what taxes they are. We're the lowest retail sales tax in the area. Everybody else has higher retail sales tax because, you know, we're surrounded by home rule, that they're already paying that. So if people, you know, say they're going to go to Crystal Lake, they're already paying that. They're going to go to Algonquin, they're paying that. You know, they're going, you know, the closest municipality that just passed it in the last election was Barrington. And it was a very, very difficult process. But we've got to be able to control the message, and we've got to work with the right people to make sure that the messaging is correct. Because we had heard through my contacts with Barrington that their biggest opposition was realtors, but they weren't really informed as to the benefits that it does have for the real estate market. And it really, you know, I don't think that we're looking to enact a real estate transfer tax. That's something that this board has never talked about. But that's, you know, another fee that could be, you know, like Courtney had said. But that's something that we would have to make clear that that's not our goal. Our goal is, you know, we're a thriving community. We want, how we talk about it with our legislators, when we talk about the numbers, the arbitrary number of $25,000 is a ridiculous number. Who came up with that? And why should the Village of Cary, for the sake of an argument, it's 18,000 people. Why can't we manage our village just like somebody with 25,000? It doesn't make any sense. And there are people that have municipalities with populations well over 25,000 that are in shambles. They just can't get it together, which is a shame. But, you know, I never point my finger at somebody else's municipality, but everybody has their problems. So we're just looking that we could continue the forward progression that we have in a very conservative manner that would be less of a burden on property taxes. Yes.
Courtney mentioned unfunded mandates, which is also a principal purpose for adopting home rule or considering it. So we didn't give you examples tonight of the mandates that are imposed on municipalities. The Illinois Municipal League, I think maybe the last time they published their list, might have been in 2019 or 2020. They have a booklet, 18-page booklet, that sets forth the mandates from the state legislature, the General Assembly, that you are expected to meet without any funding from our state government. So if you need more information about unfunded mandates as you're studying this or as you're discussing this with the community, that resource is available as well.
Any other questions with regard to home rule?
And
Thank you for putting this together, first off, Courtney. Just real fast, I apologize, Eric. Everything seems to be positive, which is fine. I would like to see some negatives with going to home rule. I don't know what are the cons. I don't think that anyone has really outlaid that. I know that's not the message that we're trying to get across, but just out of curiosity and being transparent, I would like to see that.
Well, that's some information that we get to it. I'm going to be having some conversations with some fellow mayors that have gone through this, and I'll get into the weeds with them and figure this out so that we can.
And then also with home rule for surrounding communities, I think it'd be great if if there was a way to pinpoint what it has actually done in other communities, kind of going forward at least, if we have to go through and sell it, what we can kind of put out there to say, like, hey, this is what it's actually done in other communities for us. Could potentially do for us.
That can happen.
Yeah, I agree that it's really the marketing piece. It's the educational, the marketing piece. Overcoming obstacles is always something that everyone can relate to. I'm not, we don't want to get in those situations where we've had some of our neighboring communities have to do a big referendum to get their streets fixed because they let them get into such disarray. So it's, again, trying to put out that message, the positives. What are those negatives that people are going to say about it, addressing them so that they have informed information. They may still be against it, they may be for it, but if we give them the information, I think you're going to make a much better, well-informed decision.
Agreed.
And then Assistant Administrator Sage will continue with some other information that the board requested with regards to the new revenue sources, specifically with the non-home rule sales tax option. So obviously tonight we're not looking for a final decision, but I think I'm hearing, is there a consensus to keep exploring the home rule approach, or would you like to just focus on the non-home rule sales tax?
Or if you have made a decision, do you want us to start working on an ordinance to potentially bring forth to the board?
Well, I think that it's been made clear especially by our fellow trustees here, to get a little bit more information before we were to make a final determination. But we can get some information and bring it forth to the next committee of the whole.
Wait, can you back up just a little bit? So you want more information before we would go ahead and pass an ordinance?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, and when does that need, when do you have to have that? You said, it says 79 days in advance of so January 2nd, sorry.
Yeah,
So we're looking at our 2nd December meeting would be the likely target if the board would like to attempt an ordinance for a referendum on home rule.
I just have a question.
home
Why
rule
wouldn't we go ahead and okay this to allow residents to make this choice? I don't understand why we would
Well, we just
not.
want to make sure that we have all the right information, that we're concise in our delivery and making sure that people have the right, because once this gets out that we want to talk about it, I want to make sure that we are poised to have the right facts so that we can combat all the things that might be coming at us. I would rather do something not blindly. I don't want to put something out there until we know for a fact this is the direction we want to go. She could on staff, not she. Courtney could find something that might be troublesome to somebody, and they would want to find out what that's all about. So that gives us an opportunity. We've got a little bit of time. This is something that we need to look at.
So what would,
Yeah, right. Yeah, we were looking because it can be done in any election cycle.
okay. Is there a ballpark figure of marketing costs on how much it would potentially cost to go ahead and send information or educate the village?
Again,
residents?
that's another. We had talked about that before. If we would get the consensus of the board to move it forward, that's some hard dollars that we'd have to look at spending. We'd have to do a lot of public hearings, public meetings. There would be offering, as many outreaches as possible with local homeowners, businesses, and that, so they have an understanding of what it is. So we're just trying to get an understanding if people are willing to explore this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that controlling the narrative is what you're looking at. You know, we want to control the narrative. We don't want to come out and say, hey, yeah, we're gonna take it to the next step, because then people are gonna come up with a lot of questions that we may not have answers to yet. So I think we need to have that, and perhaps even finding out, you know, from Barrington, for example, and some of the other recent communities that have had success, what specifically did they do that led to this being successful? Because we don't need to reinvent the wheel, we just need to apply it to us.
We're talking about 1%. Do we know what that dollar amount estimate would be, please?
So we're, this is what I just want to
I guess
confirm.
I kind of,
Yeah.
So I apologize. I just want to confirm, we are just talking about exploring the home rule.
right.
Yeah, so then we wouldn't be
Talking
any
percentage.
percentages
Okay.
at this point. Yeah,
Gotcha.
I know that we've kind of mixed the two.
Yeah, we did.
I apologize
It's
for
all right.
that.
Well, by becoming home rule, if we became home rule, that gives us the opportunity to do that without going to a referendum for the 1%.
I understand.
And the other option, of course, is if you would not prefer to seek the home rule status at this point, you would have the option to do a referendum process for a non-home rule sales tax, which would have a similar process, but then you would be talking about the specific dollars. Home rule itself doesn't obviously bring the dollars. That's a separate process after that.
Gotcha. Thank you.
But I would make it known that that's the direction that we would want to go, and be completely transparent to say, look, this is a benefit of this. It doesn't have to be 1%. It could be 0.5%. It could be whatever the way the board wants to move forward with it.
And Attorney Euler has provided staff a number of FAQs from other communities that have gone through this process. I'm happy to share all of those with you as well.
You know, if I could just make a suggestion, Mayor.
No.
I think you and Eric have done a great job on a couple of topics recently. We have brought trustees in one-on-one to talk about things, and I know you're going to do it for the budget planning for next year. I think dialogue in an open forum is wonderful, but I also think that it might be beneficial once you get some of this information to have those one-on-ones about this topic, because there might be big differences of opinion, and it takes a little bit of time to get your questions answered, and it's that kind of forum, I think, is just easier to do.
Thank you. I agree. I think that they're fruitful conversations, and we're able to, you know, dive deep into what their concerns are, and we can get the right answers through whatever means we have to do. Right, Courtney? our answer queen here. But yeah, these are all things that we'll be able to handle, and I look forward to having conversations with people that have some questions about it. Good. Oh, got more. Okay.
I apologize. I have more. So one of the things that was also brought up in the October meeting was, what if we issued bonds for our roadway improvements? So finance director Kelly over here did reach out to a firm that we've used previously, who was able to give us some examples of bonds that the village could
Issue, correct, yeah. I reached out to the company that we used to issue the bonds for the new Village Hall, and so they ran a few different scenarios as we were talking about, you know, the 1% non-home rule sales tax, which was approximately $650,000, instead if we issued, you know, the debt, excuse me, or if we issued debt. He ran 3 different scenarios for us based on that dollar amount of payments annually, the $650,000. So I have a few different examples, but, you know, one of the questions was about the interest cost. It's about 4.5% to 5%, depending on the length of the issuance, so anywhere from 10 to 20 years.
What's the bond rate that we have on the building? Do you know offhand?
The bond rate on the building is 3.5%.
So based on the numbers we received, so one of the examples was, what if it was about an $8.5 million bond? And then another was a $5 million bond. Those are just 2 that they showed us could be potential. So what staff did then is run a few scenarios on what would be the impact to our road network. So you'll just see here, these were the scenarios that were ran. So scenario one is $8.5 million road program in 1 year. I will just say that's a heavy program, and I don't know if our public works director would be with us after that year. But the second scenario was $5 million. That's the $5 million bond, but we spread it out over 2 years. Third scenario was essentially taking the $8.5 million bond plus some MFT funds, spreading it out over 3 years at $3 million per year. And then the fourth scenario was, what if it's not a bond, but instead it's just with that extra non-home rule sales tax revenue included with our motor fuel tax revenue, which is sitting around $730,000 annually. So this may look familiar. We show this every year, but so you can see scenario one, over the 5-year period, you end at about 68 for the average PCI. Scenario two in the green, about 63 PCI. The gray shows 66. Scenario four is about 62. Scenario five is if we stop putting any money in the roads. That's just there to show you worst case scenario if we had no money. And that's at 55 over the next 5 years. Our satisfactory network PCI, the number that we've always used is 70. So you can see even in any of these scenarios, we would still fall below that. I do want to make a note, though, that when we run these scenarios, especially for situations like this, it is assuming worse roads first, and we're not picking the program. We have seen that when we put into the model, specific programs, like when Eric, for example, has crafted our programs over each year, this can change a little bit. So I just want to point that out, that there's some variables here. But this would be the effects of if we were to pursue either of these bonds. Any questions about this? We just wanted to make sure we followed up based on the board's questions last time.
And this is assuming the $750,000 a year in MFT funds, roughly.
For depending on the year, so it's taking these scenarios. Yes, just also for certain 1, 2, and 3 also assumes a bond.
Okay.
My only question, I appreciate looking at numbers, because to me that's much easier to visualize if I see where's the money going and how it's going to work. It's just kind of maybe it's kind of silly of me to ask this, but why would we be using these without ever getting to the point that we need to be? Why wouldn't we make the bond a little bit more so that we're up where we need to be? I just don't like the idea of looking at something and saying we're still below where we need to be.
I believe that the $8 million bond was making the assumption that our payments would be from the non-home rule sales tax revenue. So that was the amount we could.
So we're maximizing what these are taking what the maximum dollars we could get.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. So in that scenario with the 8.5, it was 8.2 million. That would assume then every year annual payments of approximately $650,000 or a little bit less than that, just so that we could use that non-home rule sales tax to make those debt payments.
Okay.
So yes, we wouldn't propose increasing the bond amount just to make our target if we didn't have the resources to back it up.
I get it. So we'd have to pick something else to use in conjunction with that if we wanted to take more money. We'd have to set up another tax on utilities or on something else that we'd have to allocate towards it if we wanted to take more money. So, I mean, I just trying to make it clear, like, what we were doing here and where we're getting.
And it's unfortunate that even with this infusion of additional dollars, obviously it's still not the target we
Right.
would theoretically need to maintain that goal of that satisfactory network overall. However, looking at it from the other side of the equation, if we don't have the additional revenue and rely just on the MFT dollars, obviously we're not at that light blue line, the second to the bottom, but we're at least above the L line, which is the worst case. But you can see even if we rely on what we have status quo with our current MFT funding availability, we are heading towards the PCI average of the not even being in the good category
Right.
in the span of 5 to 8 years.
So that tells me we have to figure something out, because that would cost us a lot more if we get there to fix them.
think the positive, though, believe it or not, if you can find a positive in spending a lot of money, is that I think everybody is suggesting that interest rates are going to go down sometime in the next 12 to possibly 18 months. And I would think, well, we probably don't get to the threes again. You know, if you can drop to 4, I mean, a 1%, 1.5% differential in rate for a big payment amount will get you a lot more top-line loan amount.
Correct.
So then that changes all of this, and you can get to the higher percentage a lot quicker. And I would assume that, you know, if you go back to the calendar that we were talking about in the first meeting about home rule, when's the earliest we'd even know? Sometime in March or April?
We would know after the election.
So, okay, so March, yeah. And I don't know how long things take before you start to get ready to say, okay, we want to put these other things in place. But I guess what I'm saying is it would seem to me, even at the best case scenario, if you win and you get all your ducks in a row, you've got to be looking at least 6 to 9 months, I would think, maybe even longer. So hopefully we keep our fingers crossed and rates soften during that period, and then all your numbers would be benefited from that.
Not to be a downer, but unfortunately, as time goes on, the cost per
That too.
every dollar paves a little bit less square feet of roadway.
Who asked you?
Yeah, right.
Dark cloud, sorry.
It's storming in here now. Anything else, Courtney?
That was all I had. Thank you.
You were on a roll there. Okay. Anybody else have any questions regarding this?
I think we have direction to provide a bit more information on the home rule process for one of the next committee meetings. That would still give us flexibility to meet that timeline that Assistant Administrator Sage showed to maybe hit that March election if it is so desired. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Okay. With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned at 7 o'clock.